All right, today I'm going to be going through and rebuilding a carburetor on a Polaris ATV. This is going to be a Magnum 500, but this is going to be the exact same carburetor as a lot of the Sportsmans, some of the smaller Magnums, some of the Xplores, some of the Xpresses. So I just wanted to show you in detail about this carburetor, how to rebuild it, the common problems, what typically happens to these carburetors. So obviously we've got the carburetor off at this time. To clean a carburetor the best way possible, you want to remove that off the four-wheeler so you can see your ports, see your jets, make sure that those are cleaned properly before going back together. It's just hard to do that when it's on the four-wheeler. Sure, you can take and drain your bowl. You can drain the fuel out of the bottom bowl here. You can even pull the bowl off when it's on the four-wheeler, but it's just really hard to get into some of those ports, some of those orifices, and get it really, really clean when you leave it on the four-wheeler. So take it off the four-wheeler. To do that, you've got your throttle cable coming into your throttle housing here, just 4 Phillips screws. And obviously if you're going to pull the throttle cable, leave the throttle cable attached to the four-wheeler, you're going to have this plate already off, and you've got your throttle cable coming in through here. There's a small brass fitting that looks like this here. That's going to sit in that groove there, and your throttle cable is going to wrap around this butterfly valve here. And when you pull that throttle or push that throttle with your thumb, it's going to raise that up like that. It's going to open up your butterfly on this side here, and when you let off your throttle, it's going to snap back shut like that. If it doesn't snap, you should be able to take your finger right now, snap that like that, and it should go back without any problems. If it takes a long time to go back, if it's kind of a slower motion like that, you want to make sure you clean that really well and inspect that. There's something obviously holding that up and causing that to not slow your speed down like it should. So what's going to happen is you're going to be running along, half throttle, full throttle, whatever it is. You're going to let off that throttle. It's going to take a long time for that to idle down. Typically, when you let off your throttle, it should just within a split second, your idle should go way down. You should know that you're not giving it any more throttle. It shouldn't sound like it is just a gradual, slow decel. So that's one thing you're going to want to inspect. Next thing you're going to want to do is grab compressed air. I like to do that before we even go through and clean the carburetor at all. Take compressed air, and there's kind of a half moon, almost a half moon port right here you can blow into. And then you blow into it. I don't know if you guys are able to see it there, but your slide and your needle should go up. Your diaphragm should be pressure in there, causing your slide to go up. And if it doesn't do that, or it doesn't come back down, then you've obviously got some issues up in your diaphragm area. It's not as quick of a deal as your butterfly where it drops down. It's kind of a slower process. Which you want, because it's going to be the same way, a little bit slower process going up. So when you give it full throttle, this butterfly is going to open back here. This is going to go up, and typically when you slam on your throttle, it's not on these older machines. It's not an instant. They don't have an accelerator pump or anything. It's not an instant wide open. Okay, so I pushed it open too fast there. It all has to do with suction right there. So keep that in mind. It's not going to be just a quick deal. It's going to slide up and down about like that speed there. So just keep that in mind when you pull that diaphragm area. So idle adjust is here. You're going to screw it in clockwise. It's going to turn your idle up. Counterclockwise down. You want to make sure your four-wheeler is completely warmed up before you adjust that idle. What that's doing there, essentially, when you turn your idle up, that's essentially opening your butterfly. Obviously, it's not going to be this much, but you're just opening up your butterfly a little bit more, letting more airflow through there, sucking more fuel up. So I want to show you that when we get down into the bowl area there. But when you push this, I'll grab a larger screwdriver here. When this slide is up right here, you're allowing more fuel to be sucked up through your main jet down in this area, and I'll show you that in more detail when we get this bottom bowl off there. But I wanted to show you where that fuel is coming up through is when you pull that needle up. Right there, your main jet is plugged up because your needle's kind of, for the most part, plugging that main jet up. So when I get into the top of the carburetor here, you're going to see where you can adjust your needle. You can also adjust your main jet down here. That's going to let more fuel through when you're in full throttle, but as well as just a half throttle, you're letting more fuel through there at that time. So we'll go ahead and pull that bottom bowl off now. 4 Phillips screws. Make sure that you've got a good screwdriver to pull these apart, because a lot of times what happens is the person before you thinks they've got to go Hulk mode on this and tighten these down so far that it is nearly impossible to pull these off. These are in kind of a spot where you can grab a very small pair of vice grips. If they are too tight, somebody's maybe rounded off these Phillips screws, you can go ahead and grab vice grips and loosen them up that way. I would suggest ordering new screws if that's the case, because each time it's just going to get more and more difficult to pull these screws. So we've got, like I said, 4 Phillips screws here that we're going to pull off, and then your bowl is going to come off of there. One thing I wanted to show you on this bottom bowl, I mentioned draining your fuel earlier. You can use a flat or a Phillips screwdriver and loosen up this bolt here. What that does is let that fuel drain out your bottom nipple here. You do want to make sure that you've got a vent hose on the bottom nipple here so that fuel drains below your motor. You don't want to just let this fuel drain directly on top of your motor. It will discolor your motor. The other thing, so that fuel is dumping out there. If you loosen that screw, that fuel is going to dump out there. The other thing that's happening is when your carburetor is bouncing around, say in the back of your pickup on a trailer, or maybe your needle and seat is worn out, and I'll show you that here in a little bit. Your fuel from your fuel tank is going to be filling up your carburetor here, and you can see there's a small port on the top here that fuel can drop down into, and you want this free and clear. You want to make sure that you take compressed air, carbon choke cleaner, and blow this out, because you want that fuel to drain out this overflow tab here as opposed to draining directly into your motor, filling up your cylinder with fuel. So you do want to make sure that this is cleaned out. Again, carbon choke cleaner, blow through here. What that is you can grab your compressed air here, blow through here, and it's just a very, very small, but you can hopefully see there when I shot that out, you saw fluid come squirting out here. That's carbon choke cleaner that I had in that from cleaning it out already. But you can, again, see there that it shoots out there. So that is clear. It doesn't matter if this screw is in or out. You should be able to blow up through here without any issues. So if that is not happening, you want to make sure that you soak this bottom bowl here with this tab in there to make sure that that's cleaned out so that you don't have fuel filling up your cylinder. So inspect this O-ring, make sure it's in good condition before going back together. Next thing we're going to have is our main jet here. That's going to be right in the center, and I told you about that earlier. Your needle that comes from your slide here comes down, will directly go into your main jet area here. There's different sizes of these. I like to use a larger screwdriver. Just make sure it fits in that groove. The reason why is because if you use too small of a screwdriver and start turning that, all you're going to do is turn this screwdriver in that little opening there. It's going to damage your main jet. So use a large screwdriver, stick it on there, loosen it up. There is a brass spacer, a kind of a washer underneath of it, so you want to make sure that you don't send that flying when you use compressed air on this. You want to make sure you can see through here. The stock jets you can see are labeled on the top there. Some of the aftermarket jets, you'll have the size of them on the side, but the stock jet is on the top here. And if I can see this here, it's just extremely small numbers here, but I might have to get you those specs in the description below. I'm just having a hard time seeing what this is. I believe it's 155. I don't want you to quote me on that. I can put that in the description below. So make sure that that's cleaned out. I don't want to just take compressed air at this time and blow up through here. Make sure you're not doing that, because what that's going to do is it's going to blow that needle up. All there is a spring holding this needle in. That's right there. If you take compressed air, a large amount of compressed air, and blow that up, you're going to shoot that needle, and that spring going to compress it in this area here. Could potentially damage your diaphragm. So don't blow compressed air through there yet. I don't even like to blow carbon choke cleaner through this yet, because what that is allowing carbon choke cleaner to go up into your diaphragm area. Carbon choke cleaner has a way of destroying rubber parts, so I don't like to use carbon choke cleaner yet. I like to disassemble everything and then start using that kind of product. Next thing, you've got your pilot jet down in here. Again, use the right size screwdriver. You could potentially use something this size. This is obviously not going to fit in there. You're going to damage your carburetor. So about this size here is what you're going to need. Make sure that you're seated properly before you start turning. This is a very common one for people to damage because they'll put their screwdriver in there and start spinning before they're actually on the slot to spin, damaging that pilot jet. And this one's got a little bit of damage to it. Still functions fine. Still goes in and out just fine, but you can see it's a little rounded off at the top there. Again, pilot jet here, this is what, if your four-wheeler is hard starting, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be your pilot jet. And you want to inspect that. You will be able to see through here, holding it up to light. So if you can't, then your pilot jet is plugged up. I suggest using jet cleaners or carbon choke cleaner, blowing that out really well. And I can give you a couple links to some of those carburetor cleaner tools or carbon choke cleaner cans of spray there to clean your carburetor out. So again, don't use carbon choke cleaner yet. Down in here, you can take compressed air at this time, blow through your pilot jet area because this doesn't go up into your diaphragm, the top of your carburetor. So next thing you're going to do is I like to take and set my carburetor down. Now, if this pin right here is going to be hard to come out of there, make sure you support this back area here. If you've got a little bit of a gap like this, you can use a pair of small side dikes, get in behind this pin, pull it out. What we're going to do now, here's your float, here's your needle and seat underneath here. You want to push this pin out. Now what I like to do is use a pick right here, then just a small screwdriver, and if you can't do it, just barely tapping on it, then stop. You want to make sure you support this tab right here, because a lot of times what happens is, because this is an aluminum tab right here, somebody uses a sledgehammer to get this pin out right here, you're going to break these tabs off and your carburetor is done for you. There's no replacing this. It is just, you're getting a new carburetor. So if you can't push it out just with a slight tap with a pick like this, then don't keep trying. Make sure you support this underneath here so you don't damage that. So pull that pin out. It should go all the way out. It'll go in either direction. I like to put it in the way that I take it out. So we've got your now your float off of there and your needle is off. You want to inspect this rubber tip here, make sure that that's in good condition. Sometimes those groove, sometimes those wear out, sometimes those break off. So inspect that really well. You've got your float here, and this is the adjustable float. So you can adjust your needle here. What you're doing is if you're wanting to shut your fuel off sooner, take and push this tab when it's in this position down. Your carburetor is going to be sitting the other direction, so you're actually pushing it up. But in this position, push it down if you're going to shut your fuel off sooner. You can lift it up if you want to let more fuel flow. Most of the time what happens is people go to adjust these. They have a worn out needle and seat. They go to adjust these and it's gonna stay leaking because your needle and seat is worn out. It's not that your float is not set correctly. So there is an instance where your float needs to be adjusted. If you're trying to fix a bad needle and seat, adjusting your float 9 times out of 10 is not going to work. So keep that in mind. Most of the time these needle and seats or these floats are set correctly from the factory. If your needle and seat are in good condition, you will not have to adjust this float here. So to pull your seat out there, you've got a Phillips screwdriver. You've got 2 small Phillips screws. And we don't need to do that at this time because all that is 2 Phillips screws. This seat pops out of there and you replace that. You stick a new one in there. This one is in decent condition. We're not going to replace this seat at this time. A lot of jet kits will come with this this seat here, and you do want to replace that if you've got it. So pulling your top end apart. Now what I do is I keep my thumb on top. It is spring loaded, but you're not going to lose an eye if you don't put your hand over top of this. I just like to do this just so our diaphragm doesn't rip, doesn't push out prematurely. So I'll show you what I'm talking about here in a minute. So pull these 4 Phillips screws off here, set those aside. Each set of 4 Phillips screws is different, so make sure that you're going back in the right, make sure you're putting those in the right order there. So there is our diaphragm, there's our spring, and there's our top cap. There's a tab right in the middle here that our spring's gonna sit And to push this up out of here, you can take your finger now and just push. Now you want to be really careful. A lot of times these kind of will stick to the actual carburetor itself, so don't just keep on pushing if it's stuck. Get and kind of work that out of there. Just do something to get that out of there so you're not ripping it like this. So you can kind of grab underneath the side there. A lot of times just by doing that, it'll kind of pull it all up. So there is your slide with your needle on there. That's your diaphragm. Inspect that really good. They dry out. They just rip over time, so you want to inspect that really good. Next thing you're going to want to do is inspect your needle. Make sure your needle is on the right setting there. You can take and push this out. You can see if you hold it straight up and down, you should be able to pull it out just like that. Now, you're going to have first you're going to come out with a plastic kind of it's a keeper, but it's got two grooves on either side. So that's going to be the first thing that comes out. Next thing is going to be your needle, and then you've got a plastic spacer underneath of your clip there. And then, again, like I said, this clip is adjustable. This needle is replaceable. So I think on this model you can actually get different sizes of needles, and it'll say the size right there on the needle. So check your manual to see whatever's done to your four-wheeler. You might have to adjust your needle depending on that, your needle height, but this plastic spacer needs to be underneath of that clip there going back in. So going back in then, you drop that down there, and sometimes you got to work out getting it right down the center there, but it should come out all the way like that. Now if you tip this over too far without hanging onto this, your needle's going to dump out of there. So take your plastic clip then, drop that down in there, make sure it's seated properly. Might have to kind of wiggle it around there. Take a screwdriver, set it down into place. There you go. And then what I like to do is take that diaphragm and set it in that angle there. Then your diaphragm there has got a tab on it. Make sure that that lines up with that tab on your carburetor. Take and slide that down. You do want to make sure that your needle goes down into what would be your main jet holder, is right down in the center. If you're pushing it down and your needle is sliding up, you're not in the right spot. So you can kind of wiggle that to get that in the right place. Now the next part is a little bit tricky. You want to make sure that this lip is completely seated around there. That's what you use to seal. That's what's used to seal the top of this carburetor. So you want to make sure that that groove is in the right spot. If it's not, your diaphragm won't work right. You'll be idling when you're not wanting to, or you'll be revving up when you're not wanting to rev up. So what I do is with the diaphragm in this, in that area there, I take my finger and I don't let that slide push all the way down. Actually, I hold it up quite a bit, and then I take and let that make sure that that's seated properly all the way around, keeping my finger underneath that diaphragm, or underneath that slide. Put my spring in there, make sure our spring sits on that tab there. Make sure your cap is in the right direction. Still my finger's underneath there. If you don't put your finger underneath there, I'll show you what happens. You put your cap on there, it pushes that diaphragm down, and that slides out of place there. So that's why I like to take and I like to make sure that diaphragm is in that position there, and then keep my finger underneath there. Otherwise, it's going to slide out of place. So again, doing that same thing. Take that, again, finger still underneath there. You can kind of feel when that wiggles right into place there. Take your the smallest of the screws, and I like to get at least 3 on, ideally 4, before I let go of the slide and before I let go of the top cap there. Otherwise, that diaphragm is going to slip out of place. So just snug these up. Okay, now you can drop that down. Make sure that slides up and down like it is there. And you're all set. You can snug these up again. Again, these don't have to be extremely tight. You just want to make sure that they're sealed the way that they are. I didn't go over this, I guess, and I should do that before I put this bowl on there. But these 2 lines right here, you'll have a line that looks like this coming off of here. All these are is vents. Now, if you were to take compressed air and blow through there, if you blow through each of these, the air will come out down in here. So you can see there that if you submerge this carburetor in water, your four-wheeler's in water, if this is dropped into the water, you're gonna have water in your fuel, in your bottom bowl there. So that's why it's important that this vent line is on there. Make sure that this vent hose here is up higher than what the carburetor is, and it doesn't hurt to get that as high as possible just to keep water from going down into your bottom bowl area there. The other thing that I wanted to show you was, fuel coming in here. This is your line coming in from the fuel tank. So if you take compressed air and blow through there, your air will come up through there. Same way with carbon choke cleaner. You spray it in here, that carbon choke cleaner is going to come out of this port there. So going back together now, I'm going to take our float here. I'm going to slide our needle on there and then slide that needle down into place. Take my pen then, run it through there. And sometimes you can only get it about that far, but you want to make sure it's lined up. There we go, we can get a little bit farther than that. Then I just take a small screwdriver, just tap on it. Again, if it takes more than that, then support this back side here. You can see there, it runs all the way through right there, so it's not going to slip out. Well, it's not going to slip out anyways because this holds it into place. Okay, our main jet here, and then our washer here. Gonna put that on, make sure that's snugged up. Again, using the right size screwdriver to do that. These are brass jets going into an aluminum carburetor, so they don't have to be extremely tight. Pilot jet here. Slide that in, take the correct screwdriver, make sure you're in where you need to be. Snug that up. Again, this is the pilot jet here, but it is that is what's going to help your four-wheeler start. So if that's not clean, your four-wheeler is going to have a hard time starting, hard time sitting there and idling. Grab your 4 Phillips screws for this. And I'm going to show you the air fuel screw after this, after we snug these up. Your air fuel screw is going to take a smaller screwdriver. It's going to be on your exhaust or the outlet side of your carburetor. And what you do to adjust that or to check it is before you pull it out, screw it in clockwise and count how many turns it is. So there's half turn, 1 1/2, and my screwdriver's 2 turns. So it's 2 turns out is what it was. So make sure if you pull this out that you screw it all the way in and then turn it the correct amount of turns out. So that is how you adjust that air fuel screw. And I wanted to pull that apart so you could see what that looked like. There's a spring, typically a O-ring in there, and a spacer. So you want to make sure that you get that in the correct order. So that needle or the air fuel screw came out there, spring stayed in there, and obviously the O-ring did as well. So there's the spring. Then you probably won't be able to see it, but there's an O-ring down there and a washer. So you want to make sure that those go in the correct order. To get those out of there, a lot of times you got to use a smaller pick or a screwdriver than this to try to pull those out of there. So no sense in damaging that O-ring by trying to pull it out of there right now. You get the idea. Goes O-ring, putting it back together, it goes O-ring, washer, spring, and screw. So in that order. Then screw it all the way down. When it's seated all the way, then take and back that out. So we've got seated properly, we've got 1/2, 1 1/2, 2 turns out. So that is a completely clean carburetor on the Polaris 500 four-wheeler. If you've got questions or comments, make sure and leave those below. If you need parts for this machine, send me a message. Check out my eBay link below there. Check out my other Polaris videos. I've got hundreds of videos on the Polaris four-wheeler and a couple quick tips, some service work to do, some common problems, kind of some overviews of different four-wheelers. So thanks for watching. Again, if you like this, please subscribe and like. Thanks a lot.